A very good evening to you all, and thank you for coming to listen to this session on public sector data analytics. My name is Pye, and I'm from the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham, and I'd like to talk to you briefly about how data can redefine public services. And I'm going to start my presentation by asking you all a question. Who in this room, and put your hand up if this applies to you, has a job or has been to a job interview where your employer has specifically asked you to lose customers? Okay, so we've basically we've sold too much product, our consumers have consumed too many of our services. Your job specifically is to lose customers, and one of the really good ways of doing that is to tell your customers to go and consume that product from another organization. Who has that job? Yourself, one of you. Not a lot of you, and I'm not surprised by that, because in most industries that would be totally counterproductive, apart from one, which is jobs in local government. And the reason is, because if you think about it, we're working in an environment where our population demands more of our services. Our budget to deliver those services are ever decreasing. And most of the time we sit around with our public sector partners saying, you could do a better job. Speaking of jobs, mine is the head of insight and innovation at Barking and Dagenham. And my job specifically, and it does say this in my job description, is to disrupt the way that the council thinks. And I do that by leading a team of data scientists, and our mission is to turn data into insight-led action. And today I want to give some food for thought about the state of data in government and what we can do to reframe and rethink how government should serve its population. Still on the topic of jobs, this is what I think the job of local government is. So local government across the country are probably doing these three things. They're there to develop economic prosperity, they're there to look after the most vulnerable people in society, and they're there to develop communities. And if we broadly agree on those three things as the job of local government, we hopefully might agree that those three things, to do them well, requires a deep understanding of the population. And when I say things like a deep understanding, I'm really talking about data. And there's a reason why we need to get better at this. Because data mostly exists because of behaviors, and as our behaviors change, so does data. Our lives are not static. And therein lies a particular challenge. Local authorities up and down the country, in order for them to understand their population, they are mostly using data from the census, the last of which was done in 2011. The next one is due in 2021. A lot happens in 10 years. In the borough that I work for, in the past 10 years, our population has grown by almost 40,000 individuals. In the next 10 years, we're building 50 to 60,000 more homes. So if we're trying to design from data what those services should look like for our new population, it's quite difficult to do that when the best data set that you've got occurs every 10 years. So here's how we overcame that in Barking Dagenham. We built our own census. And Eddie has very rightly said that public services should be the largest consumer of their own data. And what we did in Barking and Dagenham was build our own census from our own data sets. And what we did was we matched together multiple data sets from our own administrative systems, some of which included the school census, the electoral roll, council tax, registrations, benefits data. And what we did by matching together our own data sets is create a very accurate demographic profile of the people that we serve. not everybody pays council tax, but sure enough, someone's going to get ill at one point in time, and the data that we can get from our GPs tells us that. Here's another reason, slightly personal, why public services need to get better at data. Ladies and gents, this is my son. So he is 9 months old. He doesn't need to wear glasses. He's just joined the Geek is the New Chic movement. And in 2036, my son will be 18 and he'll be able to vote. So he's going to be making decisions about the type of society that he wants to live in. But here's what might happen in the next 18 years. He won't understand money. He might only spend cryptocurrency. The challenge for government, going back to if our role is to look at economic prosperity, how do we capture data on new forms of wealth? Might happen. He won't learn to drive because autonomous vehicles will just pick him up and take him places. The challenge for government is what will these new emerging technologies provide in terms of data so we understand human behavior. He might be neat, so not in education, employment, or training. There's lots of people who are making a really decent living out of being a YouTuber or an Instagram model. Those weren't options when I was at school. How do we capture data about employment? I've yet to see a YouTuber make a video about filling in their self-assessed tax form for HMRC. So how do we actually capture new forms of employment or new forms of work? And finally, the thing that kind of scares me quite a bit is I can't lie to him because he'll ask Alexa, right? So the challenge here is, what does this mean for access to education? And also, what does it mean for parenting? So public services, my point here, is that we need to understand our data so that we can actually build services for the next generation that we're about to serve. If we all think that millennials are a bit of a pain, wait till these guys grow up. Another reason why we need to reframe data and think about how we judge ourselves. GDP, gross domestic product, is the measure of economic success of countries. And GDP was defined in the 1930s. We've been using this tool of measurement for the past 90-odd years. There are 5 data sets that are included in the calculation for GDP. And that is public consumption, investment, government expenditure, the level of exports, and the level of imports. So we created 5 data sets to then measure the success of countries. The problem with that is that GDP includes no data on the quality of our life. It includes no data about access to education. It includes no data about personal safety. It includes no data about tolerance. So if we are going to rethink the type of society that we want to live in, we've got to rethink how we use our own data to measure success. Here's how we've done that in Barking and Dagenham. We've created a social progress index. I'm very proud to say that this is the first of its kind in the world at a ward level. So some of these indices exist at a country level. It tells you that Norway is a nice place to live. But at a local public policy level, we wanted to understand inclusive growth. And we wanted to use our own data to understand which parts of our community are being left behind. This is Abbey Ward, one of the 17 wards that make up Barking and Dagenham. And what we can see here is that Abbey Ward, or the residents of Abbey Ward, have a medium household income of over £26,500. That doesn't make the residents of Abbey Ward the poorest, neither does it make them the richest. But look at their level of social progress, 16th, second to last. And the social progress index is calculated by looking at all of these different social and environmental factors, things that are happening to people's lives on a daily basis. If I were to compare this with Becontree, Becontree is another ward in the borough. The people of Becontree are about £1,500 better off a year, but look at their social progress. The combination of all of these socio-environmental factors says that Becontree and the people of Becontree Ward are doing better than the people of Abbey Ward. Why is that? The data helps us to point us in a direction. It might not give us the answers, but it gives us a direction that we can investigate. So my point on we've used GDP and in local context GVA, gross value added, for the past 90 years to judge the success of communities, I think needs to be reframed. We can't use 20th century tools of measurement to understand 21st century problems. One of the actionable insights that came out of developing the Social Progress Index was the establishment of beam energy. One of the indicators on the SPI was about fuel poverty. And we could actually see where in the borough that people experienced the worst levels of fuel poverty. We understood that need, and we thought, why don't we set up a renewable green energy company that is designed for those people? So we did, and you can see the date it launched literally last week. So what we did was we understood need from our Social Progress Index. And I started this presentation by asking you about demand reduction, essentially. And what we often say in public services is we need to understand and manage our demand better. And my challenge to public services is it really about demand management, or is it really about the identification of need? If we can understand need better, we can prevent it from becoming demand by designing solutions that better meet that population. The second thing I said was that local authorities are there to protect vulnerable people. So hopefully all of you will recognize that these are the characters of Only Fools and Horses. Now, if I were to ask you to think about the characteristics of these characters, what would you say? I will start. I think they're very entrepreneurial. Any thoughts? Sorry? Poor. Okay.
We had a dodgy.
Dodgy. Right, dodgy. Okay, so this is a kind of three-generational family living in a house. And they have a number of characteristics. I think they're entrepreneurial, they have vision, they have passion. Unfortunately, public services describe them as a troubled family. Because if you think carefully, what do the trotters do? They evade tax. They don't really have a job. They're kind of wheeler dealers. Poor granddad definitely needs care, but he doesn't have it. He lives on, I can't remember what floor of the flat they live on. He's always complaining about climbing the stairs. They've got no education. I think Rodney might have one A-level. O-level, sorry. O-level. So what we do in public services is we define these characteristics as being vulnerable. Now, Only Fools and Horses would have been a very, very different show if that's like how we define them. So what I'm asking public services to do is not look at data through the lens of risk, but to look at data through the lens of opportunity. What if we stopped calling the trotters a troubled family And even if we did, what impact does a troubled family make across the entire public service? And I'm trying to answer that question by this project. Care City is a health innovation organisation based in Barking. With us in the council, we have connected a health and social care dataset together. And we're exploring two things. One is troubled families, and the second is the phenomenon of social isolation. What is the impact of these two things on the wider public service? What we're finding is some really interesting things. Social isolation, the majority of the narrative has been about, social isolation, loneliness affects elderly people. It doesn't just affect elderly people. Actually, we're finding teenage mothers to be socially isolated. If you think about that carefully, it makes sense. If you're a teenager, most of your social circle is at school. Once you become a mother, you've often left school. So what are public services doing to respond to that particular need? By working with Care City and by connecting that data set together, what we are doing is building a true foundation of integrated health and social care. We might have heard those words quite a few times, but what I've experienced is integrated health and social care is often framed in the narrative of merging organizations and merging processes. What we're doing is saying, let's not do that for now, but let's merge our data. Let's connect our data together and see if we can find actionable insights that help us to design public services for the better. And I want to leave you with this quote. Do we meet each person curious about the miracle of the human being that we're about to connect with? Or do we meet a poor person that we're about to help? I think that our services, our systems, and our processes in public services are designed to do the latter, not to do the former. So I implore public services to rethink data, not in the lens of risk, but in the lens of opportunity. And I think if we all begin to do that, we'll be able to redefine what public services mean for a better society. Thank you.